This is the Convene podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Convene Talk. My name is Maggie, digital media editor. It has been now a few weeks since the May-June issue has been out, so today we're going to talk a bit more about the cover story on meetings and the maker movement. We all contributed different stories and aspects on the topic, but I wanted to turn this to Michelle for a bit of a background on how we arrived at this topic for the cover story and the intersection between makers and the events industry.
Thanks, Maggie. I don't recall exactly how we landed on this topic, but I think it was in one of our brainstorming sessions, and it seemed to sort of, just come up as a natural covered story. Because I think what we were talking about is how we are also immersed in digital things and looking at our screen and talking a lot about Gen AI and the good parts of it and the scary parts of it. And I think we just sort of arrived at the idea that it's really interesting to talk about the things that make us human. And the maker economy is certainly all about human initiative and creating things. And it's interesting, as I was at EduCon last week and somebody who hadn't gotten the issue yet asked me what the next issue was about. And I said, oh, it's about the maker economy. He looked very confused. So he could not he knew what that was, but he couldn't put that together with the meetings industry. So I spent a little time telling him all about the bits and pieces that we wrote about that make up this cover story. And like, if I had actually strategized how we would really talk about this topic with all these different parts, I couldn't have come up with a better solution, because I feel like we really, all of us contributed in a way that is a very full picture of the economy, the maker economy, and how it does relate to meetings. So whether it's destination specific, that it's a destination that really aligns itself with makers in their community, whether it is something, it's an activity that Casey talked about, of an indigenous person who uses meetings as an opportunity to teach participants while they're making something about that indigenous history, culture, community, whether it is an initiative that sort of just like blossoms, like the one that I wrote about in Mexico, where two women, a mother and daughter, decided that they were going to create something, crochet rhombuses for a religious offering for this small town. And then it got a little bigger and they put it in one part of the town. The mayor took notice and then he said, let's make this an initiative. And before you knew it, 200 women in the town were crocheting these rhombuses, and it was becoming this big piece of public art that covered streets. And then it became part of Expo Dubai. It was the covering for the Mexican pavilion. And to me, that's just like, it's just like another wonderful thing about being human. You just don't know what you create and where it's going to go. So for me, this was like a passion project. It was something I always love handmade things. I think I've stopped giving gift cards to Amazon and in favor of Etsy, because I feel like there's something like it's a little more personal. It's not something that is, manufactured on a great scale, and it does support people who that's how they make their living, is creating unique items. So that's the background. Casey, let's turn it over to you because you wrote the story about the Indigenous initiative.
Thanks, Michelle. I really loved talking to Mark Forget and writing about his organization, Makatu Workshops. Mark is Indigenous Canadian himself, and he has worked in the events industry for a really long time and noticed that there was a real lack of Indigenous representation. And he was at a point in his career where he was kind of looking to maybe switch jobs or try something new. And he thought that he could really offer something in that space. And so that's how Makatu Workshops was formed. It's a physical shop in Ontario, but he also brings his initiative to different events around Canada. Basically, he invites people either into his shop or into sessions to create Indigenous art. So that could be moccasin or mitten making. It could be dream catcher making. I know he said that one of the most popular things they do is create medicine bags. And so he encourages people to engage in these different crafts. And while they're using their hands to engage, instead of, perhaps looking at their phones and getting distracted, they're able to listen to him speak. He talks about kind of more serious topics like residential schools, which housed abducted Indigenous children who were often abused while there. He's able to deliver this really important message while they're working so they can really, really focus on the importance of what he's saying. So I love that topic. Barbara?
Yeah, thank you, Casey. Just when you're talking about the engagement, I didn't contribute to the cover story directly, but I wrote in our feature Meetings and Your Brain, I wrote about some of the latest research about what happens in our brains when we're engaging with art, which I find that just a fascinating topic about how art communicates to us. It's like very ineffable. And I do think that as we get more technological, I've just seen that things that are handmade are more treasured. There's something called the William Morris effect, which is this designer in England that when the Industrial Revolution was at its peak, all this wallpaper, it went from like like ornate curlicues from Versailles to nature and big windows. So to get back to the research says that the same networks that light up when we're learning and we're engaging in complex social behavior light up when we're looking at art. And anyway, I just think this is the more art, more that we can make with our hands, the more color, I think just the more it draws us out in ways that we don't use language necessarily to communicate about it. It's something that is maybe older and deeper than language and writing. Maggie, what are you thinking?
This actually made me think of the illustration that we have for the cover and the two twin sisters that created this beautiful art for us. And in general, when you look at what they are creating, it's very interesting. And they also posted a little bit of behind the scenes on Instagram of how they created this piece for us, which I loved. I think always our covers are next level, but this specifically because it was so much about what makes us human. And I saw, I think it was Simon Sinek that posted it recently on social media. It was a joke, of course. What makes us human is just recognizing certain objects like cars on CAPTCHA. So that apparently is what technology thinks of us that makes us human, which is ridiculous. In my interviews, when I spoke with Matthias Fosch, a former IAPCO president, about the gift that he gave for his final year as a president, which was very personal to him. It was these handmade slippers from his mom. But he also mentioned something that did not make it into the story. And he said that he generally loves art. He's a very artsy person, and he loves to buy pieces that would become a conversation piece in his house. And I said, I'm not sure what you mean by a conversation piece. And he's like, it's this piece of art that there's something like strange and that captures and draws you in, that people will definitely stop there and be like, what's that? Like, where did you get it? What's the background story? And it's always very interesting that, of course, he buys it from artists. So he asks them about the background story, and it becomes this whole thing. And very similar to his present, many people in the industry now know of these sleepers that his mom created for the attendees of the IAPCO annual meeting, and it has become a conversation piece. So he said many people come back to him and say, oh, I know that your mom did that, and how is she doing? Is she still making it? It was such a fun idea. So it becomes a conversation piece. And I think that's very important when it comes to meetings, just having something to anchor people. He works for a PCO company. And I said, do you give advice to your clients when it comes to creating such gifts? And he said, we can advise, but it's never top of mind. So we can suggest a little something, but it's never right why the meeting was created. It's just something that I think it's interesting, and it's something extra that such a company brings to the table. Jen, what kind of sparked an idea?
This is Jen, Dienst, senior editor. So I just wanted to touch on what you were saying, Maggie, about like kind of an anchor for meetings, because I interviewed a few people in Portland for a story about something called My People's Market, which is actually a marketplace that was created for BIPOC communities, specifically, artists, anyone who makes anything handmade, also food. So chefs, anyone who makes food products, really, any type of local business. And they created it several years ago as a way to connect them with business opportunities in the hospitality and events industry specifically. That's why they started it. And I thought that was really interesting because, I think Portland is one of those places, like when you think of their identity, you really do think of like unique and quirky and handmade. And so it makes sense that, a hotel, like I remember when I went last year, I think it was last year or the year before, and the hotel I stayed in, the entire part of the ground floor was a store dedicated to local goods. So everything from tote bags to food to drinks, I mean, everything was locally sourced. And that's a lot of buying power. That's a lot of, that can, have a huge economic impact on a small business. So I thought, why not create, connect these two? And it went so well that they ended up expanding it to the public. And now it's, I believe, the largest marketplace of its kind in the Pacific Northwest. And it attracts thousands of people. There's multiple events every year at different locations. And it's not just a marketplace of vendors who make, everything from jewelry to textiles, to art. It's a celebration of music and food and performance art and so many other things. So what's interesting is someone I spoke with at Travel Portland who actually helped start the first event. He was one of the people behind it. They ended up connecting a lot of event planners with the marketplace so that they could kind of do their own mini pop-up version at their own events, because it was something that they love so much. And there was even one example of a group that specifically timed their meeting to come to Portland at the same time as the marketplace because their attendees loved it so much. So I thought that really spoke to the power of this kind of handmade movement. Like you were saying earlier, Michelle, I think you're right. Like, and Barbara, like people want, I think, to walk away from a place with something like tangible. I know I do. I just got back from Bhutan, and I can tell you, I bought when there was an opportunity to buy something handmade, I bought it. I now have 4 scarves hanging in my closet from Bhutan alone, as well as some other cool handmade items. And I feel like people want that. People love that. And the event planners that I spoke with said that they specifically kind of set up these pop-up marketplaces like in the public areas of the venue, I think the convention center, so that attendees can kind of meander their way through and shop when they have time between sessions. And they said that I believe like the first day the vendors had completely sold out. Like it was super successful. And so they had cherry picked a few, but it sounded like they wanted to expand it even more when they came back. So I just thought that was really cool. I just love that it's supporting local businesses. I love that attendees are walking away feeling like they got something out of it, learned something, bought something. So yeah, I just thought it was a great example of how it connects with the meetings industry specifically. Barbara, what are you thinking?
Well, you just sparked my thoughts about like this wonderful trend in destinations to use local art. I live in Oakland where there's beautiful murals everywhere. I love to stay at an Omni because they fill the hotel with local visual art, and they basically have exhibitions where you can just, it's contemporary art usually, and it's local. Like, I just remember when a hotel or a destination would get like, all the sculptures in the plaza look the same, and all there was the hotel art. And I just love the trend towards filling local public spaces with local art. I like it a lot. Yeah, Michelle, what are you thinking?
I'm thinking a million different things, but one is like I'm going to say probably difficult to connect to events, but more about the maker economy. So this is specific to what I love, which is crochet. And so I don't know if anybody has seen there. So there was a photo of Taylor Swift wearing a crocheted dress that now has like all of the influencers, all the crocheters are like, oh, we have to make this, we have to follow. And then somebody found the dress online and it's being sold for like $100. So this has brought up a really interesting conversation, which is, are these makers being paid enough for their work? Because crochet is not something that you can do on a loom or manufacture. It has to be done by hand because they're intricate stitches. There have been 3 that I've seen on Instagram who have like detailed how long it would take for one person to make this garment would be probably 50 hours. And so you're figuring that they're getting paid maybe maybe $1 an hour. So it kind of raises the whole maker economy, raises this question of like, does it really support makers, and are we paying enough for their labor? Or is this becoming another one of those examples of, cheap fashion or exploiting people in other countries to do the work? Sorry, I don't mean to bring it down, but it's just part of the whole, I think, thinking or rethinking about the maker economy and making sure that people are paid a decent wage for their labor.
The other story I did for the cover story was speak with folks at Knoxville, who is actually branded the Maker City. And that's because they were actually selected back in 2016 to be Etsy's first Maker City. So bringing it back to Etsy being awesome and identifying cities that really encourage makers and create an economy where they can thrive. And ever since then, Knoxville has taken that really seriously. Not only is that their official nickname, but they also established a Mayor's Maker Council, which was formed to help with efforts to organize, support, and advocate for local makers. And they also host every year the Maker City Summit, which is a place where local makers can all come and gather and network, and they can hear from experts who have already established their business and learn how to scale it or, deal with legal issues and all these different questions that might come up when they're trying to establish a small business, which I think is great because that speaks to what you were just saying, Michelle. A lot of these makers really need the support to make sure they're earning a fair wage and they're setting up their businesses properly and being compensated for their work. So I love everything that Knoxville has done since 2016 to really make sure they're supporting the maker side of their economy. Jen?
Yeah, that's really cool. I wanted to say that something I thought was cool about the way that My People's Market in Portland supports local makers is they reduce the fee to participate to, I don't know what the amount is, but it's a very low, like affordable amount. And I believe that they offer scholarships as well. Specifically eliminated is I also spoke with the person who runs it and organizes it. And they've tried to reduce as many barriers as they could because they found that, a lot of these makers can't afford storefronts, like physical brick and mortar stores, because we all know how expensive real estate is and rent is, especially on a commercial level in a popular city like that, in a downtown like that. So this is a way to give them like a physical space where they can reach more people, but in a way that's like much, much more affordable, which I thought was really cool.
I love that.
Yeah, I think there are many good examples, and there's more details in the actual cover story that I would invite people to check out and check out the cover itself. I think events become catalysts for building communities, and we see that in all these examples, just bringing all these makers and creators together, but also giving them kind of a platform to reach new people with the events that they're just coming to a certain destination. And also to Barbara's point, I love when there is a venue or a hotel and there's art inside. It just makes it memorable, in a way, because it's something different. And I think it also becomes kind of a conversation piece for the event itself. People often would stop by and be like, have you seen this? What do you think of this? Or there's more information about the creator of the piece. I think it's very, very nice thing that should exist with events, right? And I'll just leave our listeners with that. And as usual, there will be links of the articles in the show notes. And don't forget that we also are makers, and so support us by subscribing and sharing the podcast with other event profs. And as always, until next time.